All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking to you today, and so glad to talk to you specifically, Arlen Grossman, the thought leader from California. Hey, Arlen, how you doing today?
I'm doing okay, Hal. Right now, there's somebody outside putting in an electric gate for us, which I'm very excited about. Press a button and it'll open by itself, and I won't have to do it manually.
So you have like a gated driveway then? I did not realize that. I think I was at your house once. Is this a new thing where you have that gate there?
It'll be, yeah. We had one temporarily for a little while, but this one will be quality and it'll be really good.
All right. And you're in the same house, Delray Oaks. I don't want to be too specific, but
35 years in the same house. Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty nice. Way to go. Yeah. I mean, I've owned the same house now with my wife for 26 years, but I haven't lived in it for that entire time because, as you well know, I lived for a good chunk of time in beautiful Monterey, California, or Monterey County, California, and different towns in Monterey County.
I sure wouldn't want to buy a new house now with the prices in California.
Yeah,
people can afford it.
Well, they kept going up and up. When I look at the rental prices, even I'm amazed at how little I paid when I was living in Monterey. Actually, under $1,000 for quite a nice one bedroom. I think it would be over two, perhaps, at this point. We have Arlen with us. It is an Arlen Tuesday, and it's also Earth Day, Arlen. And before we get into that, I do want to just quickly again show my little deck here because I just want to make sure you got the what the deck image was about. So I guess we don't need to belabor too much, but it's just really just so disheartening to see what we're doing to our planet. And you got the little derrick in the middle of the Earth, right there over the United States, actually. And then you can see instead of oil coming out of it, it's blood or planet bleeding. The question I ask is it too late to stop the bleeding? Do you have a preliminary or, what's your response to that question? Is it too late?
Well, I think we mostly ignore it too much. It's rarely talked about as being an important problem, but obviously it could finish us off, if we keep it going like it is. And that's not, we have to do something, and we're not doing anything. And certainly the Trump administration is not doing anything.
Well, you said that we don't talk about it enough, and that's not the case on Halitics. In fact, you probably remember even back in the old Monterey days on KRXA 540, this was frequently a topic on the morning show and on some of the other shows that we had, including the Scott Dick Show, and Deborah Lindsay had a great show as well where she focused on the ecology and the environment. But you're right, this seems to be pretty far down on the list of most media stories focus.
Yeah, you talked a lot about taxing the oil companies and all that kind of thing, and people thought that was maybe overdid it, but I think there's definitely merit in doing that because it's not getting better.
Yeah, well, to be real clear, what my position was and is that we should tax the actual fuel itself. And the consumer of the fuel, whether it's coal, whether it's a gasoline, oil, any fossil fuel should be taxed. So the consumer, the burner of the fuel, because that's when you consume it, you burn it, pays it. That could be a power plant. That could be you when you drive up in your gas guzzler. Now, I don't drive a gasoline powered vehicle anymore. I don't think you do either, Arlen, but those who do would have to pay more.
Yeah. No,
and I was amazed, and just to follow up, this is a no-brainer for me. I really liked economics when I was in college, and when you raise the price of anything, consumption drops. We need to consume less fossil fuels. We need to stop consuming them, and the way you stop it is you make it more expensive. I was amazed in Silicon Valley just how many Teslas there are. Many more per car in Silicon Valley than here in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is a pretty high density of Teslas, I believe. And I think it's a big reason for that is the cost of gasoline. The more expensive gasoline costs, the more people are going to do whatever they can to avoid purchasing it.
I got to tell you, Hal, last Saturday, Fred and I were in front of the Tesla dealership in Seaside, marching along with a lot of other people against Musk and against everything that he stands for. And of course, Tesla, is dependent on him, or he's dependent on profits from Tesla.
Aren't you kind of cutting your own throat, though, by demanding that people give up their electric cars when we're looking at a planet that's burning up, as a matter of fact, because we're burning too much gasoline?
No, I think electric cars are great. I have two of them, two Priuses, but I think Tesla, just specifically Tesla, is bad because it's owned by Elon.
All right. Well, we're going to start, as we often do, or we'll continue early in the program, just briefly talking about the situation in Gaza, and then we will pivot back to Earth Day and some other topics as well. So, according to the BBC, 3 hours ago, new Israel-Gaza ceasefire plan proposed, according to a Hamas source. I'm certain that will not come to any fruition, but I just put that headline there because this story does contain the casualty count, Arlen, and just real quick, you can see here's a bomb. The last ceasefire ended. There it is, Israel bombing Gaza. It's unclear why they did. They came up with some pretext that was clearly bogus, but Trump had said, go ahead. So they did. And then we get the actual count. 26 Palestinians killed in the last 24 hours. And I don't have a change from yesterday's number, Arlen, basically because I think the number yesterday included quite a few who were killed yesterday, actually, or who were killed yesterday. They weren't just from the weekend. So we kept it 51,240 identified Gazans, more killed this morning in Gaza. And the number that we can attribute to the current president is 1,740, and that's since March 18th through April.
Yeah. And we
21st.
remember that Donald Trump promised to fix the situation in Gaza and in Ukraine. And so far, they're still fighting. People are still dying. And, I'm really upset that we've abandoned Ukraine, in favor of Russia. I know you have a different point of view, but it looks awful to me.
Yeah, well, I just think we shouldn't be promoting a war with Russia. And I think Trump has handled this better than he's handled most things. I just don't see how we should be involved. I think the history of the 20th century, except for World War II, really, and maybe World War I, World War I also, but otherwise, at least since World War II, the history has been that we've been involved in regional conflicts, regional wars, and we've almost invariably made things worse. We've left a wake of destruction, death, havoc, mayhem in our wake, and we shouldn't be doing that.
Well, you're right, but I think Europe understands that at some point we have to stop Russia from its aggression, and if it invaded Ukraine, and it shouldn't be allowed to, take over Ukraine. So I think we owe it to the people of Ukraine to, hold strong, and we're apparently not giving them anything more right now, and Europe is promising to do it in our stead, I guess.
Well, this is the thing, Arlen. We owe it, I think, to the people of Ukraine to do everything possible to broker a peace rather than to prolong a war that's utterly destroying their country.
Well, it's easy. Peace is easier said than done, as we know from many experiences.
I mean, part of the reason I think we have a disagreement is I think we disagree somewhat on the facts. I think your view is generally that Putin is 99% to blame, and mine is more like 50-50. And also, we've talked before, and by the way, we've got a caller. Let me get that call. Caller, we'll get to you in just a moment. Please hold for 1 sec. Sorry, I had a little bit of a problem. I'm going to mute you as well because I don't want to. We'll get to you in just a sec, caller. I absolutely promise. So just hold, please. So there we go. and also that at least in 22, I believe, or 23, after the invasion began, there was a real opportunity to have a peace negotiations, and there was negotiations, and we stopped them. So I think maybe we have some disagreement about those facts. If you don't share that view of what happened.
No, I don't think Putin really wants to negotiate. He wants the whole country.
Well, I think then don't we owe it to at least try to negotiate? And maybe now it's beyond possible to negotiate with him, but it wasn't in 22. The New York Times is really, even the New York Times had to acknowledge, yeah, there was real movement. And then Boris Johnson went to Zelensky and said, you can't make a deal with Putin. Even the New York Times has admitted that. So you keep trying. You keep trying because the alternative is an utterly destroyed country.
Yeah, well, I think Putin obviously has told us what he wants, and he wants more land. He wants more opportunity to attack other countries, and we have to, put up a stop to that.
Well, how do you propose we put a stop to it?
Well, of course, I agree with you. We need some kind of peace negotiations, but it has to be fair to both sides, Ukraine and Russia. And Ukraine's got to be able to at least keep controlling their own country and not giving up too much land.
All right, well, let's not belabor too much this issue unless you'd really like to, Arlen. I really don't want to get bogged down in Ukraine on this Earth Day. We do have a caller. Caller, who's on the air?
Hey, it's Ari. How you doing, Hal?
Hey, Ari. Good to hear from you. How are you today on Earth Day? Happy Earth Day.
God bless. Thank you. I only have a quick comment, and you guys can expand if you want. The war, words are important. So when we say war, we can see war in the situation with Ukraine, right? I think most people will say, okay, that's a war. You got army, military. We can disagree who's right, NATO, Russia, Putin, and all those bad guys or good guys. Anyway, I won't get into that. But the one in Gaza, I think we have to differentiate it and call it what it is. And it's really, it's not really a war. It's a war, unless you want to call it war on civilians, mass bombings of the civilians. I think the words of the Pope, who left us just the other day, was correct to call it terrorism. It's a terrorism by a state. So it's state terrorism by Israel. And that's all I had today. Thank you.
All right, Ari, thank you for that call. Appreciate it. Yeah, Arlen, go ahead. You were responding. Just want to let Ari go. Go ahead, sir.
We all agree on that. We all agree it's a terrible atrocity what Netanyahu's doing to Gaza, and it's inexcusable.
Yeah, and let's throw Trump on top of that pile of the committing inexcusable crimes, because he's fully backing Netanyahu and going beyond what Harris Biden did when they did hold up shipments of those 1-ton bombs. Trump has shipped those bombs to Israel.
Yeah, it's just terrible what we've done and what we've been unable to control over there, and it just keeps going on and on.
Well, what's also so sad, Arlen, is that there was a moment when it looked like Trump was getting it under control. He did send his guy Witkoff over there, and Netanyahu did stop the bombs for a couple of months. So the fact that Trump took his boot off Bibi's throat, said, go ahead, kill again, kill, is triply tragic in my view.
It's all tragic. There's just too many people dying, too many civilians, too many women, too many children, and it's making Israel look really bad. I mean, Netanyahu is just, it reminds me of Trump. They're very similar in my mind.
He reminds me of Hitler, to be honest with you. Netanyahu does, and
yeah,
Trump's complicit in that genocide.
Our whole country, yeah.
All right, Earth Day 25, Arctic sea ice sets a record low maximum in 2025. So the winter time, the ice in the northern hemisphere, of course, the ice does expand over the Arctic, over the top of the world, and it expanded less this year than it has in the 47 years that decent records have been kept. This is unsurprising, Arlen. 24 was the hottest year in recorded history. We saw temperatures on the planet for the entire year 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. It's a very, very worrisome number. Of course, it's just a number, but it's a scary one. Any thoughts, any comments on that?
Well, the numbers will change from year to year, but the trend is definitely upward in temperature and climate change and all that. And it definitely, spells a lot of trouble for everybody on planet Earth.
Arlen, you made a good point, which is that my carbon tax, fossil fuel, I really try to call it only fossil fuels tax because that's what it is. That's what I propose. You made a good point that my fossil fuels tax was very unpopular when I talked about it on KRXA 540, and it continues to be extremely unpopular. I've written about it, and people have mocked the idea, but it is the right answer. So my question to you is, do you have other thoughts, other ideas, other proposals? And what do you think our politicians, specifically the Democrats, who at least acknowledge this is real, should be doing?
Well, I think it should be a whole complete solution, get a lot of things involved. I think you're right about the fossil fuel tax. I think that will help. People, of course, don't like to pay taxes, so, they're not going to like it. But there has to be an all-encompassing plan that, covers everything from the ocean to the sea and the ocean and the land and everything else. So we have to do something, but right now nobody's doing anything.
Well, there's been talk. I don't know if you've thought a lot about this. I mean, I have, but most people haven't spent as much time as I have on this. But if you thought a little bit about, say, the cap and trade proposals that really were implemented, but not, fully, but only sort of half-heartedly, or, proposals to have carbon offsets, which is somewhat similar to cap and trade, paying undeveloped nation or less developed countries, developing world, global south, paying them money so that they don't industrialize. I mean, do any of those jump out at you as good ideas?
I think
or all of them do, perhaps.
Yeah, any and all are good ideas, but the fact is that certainly under the Trump administration, absolutely nothing will be done, and they disregard climate change. They call it a hoax. So as long as Trump's in power, we're not going to get any progress at all, and we're going to get behind in the problem, a few years behind in the problem by the time anything changes.
Well, we are way behind already. I mean, it's not as though the Democrats were making progress either. We extracted more petroleum under the Biden-Harris administration than under any other previous four-year presidential term. So both parties have to take ownership of this terrible problem, much as they do Gaza. Existential, really, problem.
Well, I think,
all right, well, I think go ahead.
I think the Democratic Party would do more if the Republicans weren't there blocking them. So I think they would like to do more.
Kamala Harris said flat out she wasn't going to ban fracking. She was very clear. She made it clear by saying she was clear that she wasn't going to ban fracking. So. Well, I'm not sure that, and the Democrats used to often post about how oil prices had gone down under Biden. They were so low. So that doesn't sound like you're trying to reduce our consumption, but maybe I'm wrong about this.
They're just trying to win an election, House, or they're going to, talk about things like that. But they, almost all Democrats agree that climate change is a major problem, and we're going to be in trouble if we don't take care of it.
All right, as I mentioned earlier, there it is from the Copernicus Climate Change Service. 24 is the first year to exceed 1.5. And we're talking about the climate especially because it is Earth Day. So obviously a burning Earth is not a good thing. 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial level. That's the latest data. And I just wanted to focus a little bit, Arlen. We'll get into our stories, other stories in a moment, but why that 1.5 degrees is considered significant from the IPCC report, International, I don't know what it is, Planet something or other. Do you know what the International Panel on Climate Change? That's what it is. International Panel on Climate Change. 2018 special report. 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels makes it much harder, much more expensive to mitigate the negative impacts, including higher seas, more extreme weather, much more flooding, accelerating extinctions.
It seems to me that Earth Day was much more important and talked about like a decade or two ago than it is now. People are just not focusing on it. And I think a lot of people are hoping that technology could change things. I don't know if it can or not, but obviously there's not a big push to get something done right now.
Do you have any thoughts on what average everyday people, those you hang out with, how we should respond to this?
I don't have any good answers, Hal. I think it has to be done as a country, as a world. We had those Paris climate accords, was it, that we dropped out of? And, I think it has to be a worldwide thing, and including our whole country. I don't know about individually. I'm not sure. We recycle a little bit. That's fine, but I don't think it does that much.
One of the remarks I've made in the past, and I said this even 10, 12 years ago in Monterey, and I've continued to say this or at least question, does it make sense in this environment, in this worsening environment, to reproduce? Now, both of us have already reproduced, so we're past our window, or at least, I assume you are. I know I am. Sure. What would you tell your kids if they asked you, I'm thinking about having a baby? What would you say to them?
I think more and more the younger people are questioning, whether it's smart to have a baby in this kind of a, atmosphere with things going the way they are. I noticed some news articles about the Trump administration wants to figure out a way to increase population. I don't agree with that. But, I think a lot of young people are purposely putting off having a family, having children, because of all the problems that we have. And I think I would feel the same way if I was in that position too.
Yeah, Arlen, you and I see that exactly the same way. And I think it's interesting you mentioned the Trump administration. Elon Musk has, I believe, 14 kids with many different women. And you can see from his experience that there's obviously a benefit, right? A biological benefit for him, for his cells, for his organism to reproduce, because he has so much resources, so many, that even if the earth is significantly depopulated because of his actions and those of others in the administration, which they are doing, and they are depopulating the earth, they'll repopulate it, right? They'll be, even if the carrying capacity, we know it is, the carrying capacity of the planet is dropping, they're busy killing people in numbers that are so great that at some point there'll be empty spaces that their children will and grandchildren will presumably fill.
I think there's too many people in the world already, and I don't want to see any more. So, that's my position.
Well, I certainly don't want to see more Musks. Arlen, the New York Times, you said we don't talk about enough. I just wanted to show, today is Earth Day, so I took Arlen off. There's the front page. I've been doing this a little bit. This is the top of above the fold. It's actually a little bit below too, but most of the front page was taken up with the Pope, which is fine. He's an important world leader, died. But there's nothing above the fold on the climate catastrophe, Arlen. We'll get to the bottom of the fold in a minute, but I assume you certainly don't object to the Pope being featured as the lead and the top story in today's newspaper.
Well, that's understandable. There are so many Catholics in this country and around the world. And like we talked a little bit before the show, Hal, who's the next pope going to be? What is he going to believe? Because this particular pope, was a little more liberal, a little bit more inclusive than other previous popes. And, we don't know if it's quite possible they may go back to somebody more conservative and traditional. So we'll just have to wait and see.
I asked you this, Arlen, off air, if you will, but I'll ask it again. Do you know whether he was considered to be somewhat of a radical, somewhat of a social justice warrior, if you will, meaning Pope Francis, before he became Pope, when he was just a priest?
My memory is that he wasn't seen as anybody radical or anything like that. I think he surprised a lot of people by being as liberal and inclusive as he has been since. And I think he's bothered a lot of traditional Catholics. So that's why it'll be so interesting to see who the next pope will be and, what they're going to emphasize, tradition or being a little bit more loose and liberal.
All right. We do ask you to subscribe to Halitics, and you've got the like button there, the thumb up for you as well to click. That all helps me, helps get the videos out there for more and more folks to see. I know Arlen was excited about the big jump in the number of subscribers that accompanied my video last week, and I was very pleased, Arlen, hoping to get to that 500 magic number, which I think leads to some monetization of the videos for me. But the downside of that is, I don't know if you watch many YouTube videos, but the ads have become awful. I mean, you watch a video and every 5 minutes, Google sticks another 30-second ad in there. It's miserable.
Yeah, well, I think that's our entire society is that way. It's just getting more commercial. People are trying to, find a way to make more money, more profit. And, you see it on the internet, you see it on TV, you see it everywhere, frankly. And it's a disturbing trend as far as I'm concerned.
Arlen, I am much more critical of the New York Times than you and than most people I know. I think that it disserves us in many ways, although I recognize it's the best single one, most comprehensive news source. So I want to get into my criticisms of it a little bit, which go directly to what we were talking about, both Gaza and Earth Day. You've mentioned that we don't talk enough about the environment, the environmental collapse that we're living through, and also the genocide in Gaza. And I do blame the New York Times for that. I want to just continue with the front page. Today is Earth Day. I would have hoped there would have been some mention of the climate crisis. And I certainly would have thought, when it comes to Pope Francis, who has made a big deal about his objection to Israel's war on the people of Gaza, the killing there, the massacres. They do say, I just want to show this is a whole front page. We'll just start with the genocides first. Groundbreaking Pope reshaped the church. And I don't know if you can really read it, but I'm going to sort of try to highlight this. The right side, the left side, actually, as you look at it, is a man of peace. And then the Times gives you several items where Pope Francis actually did indeed work aggressively for peace. If you can say he worked aggressively for peace, that sounds like a oxymoron, but I believe it's fair. And not any of those examples include his outspoken opposition to the Israeli occupation and killing in Gaza. I think it's really deserves his memory that when they call him a man of peace, they list several different examples of it, up to 23, effort to include women. But his last address yesterday, which I played, Arlen, on this program, he didn't read it, but he wrote it. Apparently, it was supposedly his words, was included quite a long criticism of Israel and what they're doing in Gaza. So I think this New York Times is letting its readers down by not talking about that.
Well, I think in general, the New York Times covers the important stories. They don't get it right every time, and it's hard because there's, hundreds of stories all the time, every day. But I think they do as well as anybody. Certainly, there's a lot worse newspapers around. And by the way, I saw something a little bit earlier this morning that I thought was very interesting. The producer at 60 Minutes has said he's going to leave. And the reason is because there's been pressure on him and the whole program to, not be so critical of Trump. And so, I think the network and the sponsors, Paramount or whatever, don't want to see the anti-Trump stories, which the New York Times, 60 Minutes often puts on. They've usually run some things that are very critical of what is going on with the Trump administration. And I think, the Trump people, of course, are watching every kind of media. And so I hope they're not going to, the 60 Minutes will not change. I hope they won't, give up what they've been doing.
Well, we do need a vigorous media that challenges power, that challenges the president, that challenges Congress. And I would posit to you, Arlen, that by not discussing the Pope's opposition to the Israeli murders in Gaza, they're actually, the New York Times, that is actually not challenging power. They're not taking on Trump. And they're not taking on, they didn't take on, just as they didn't take on Harris Biden.
Well, I think if you take every day, I think there's a lot of things critical of Trump, and they don't shy away from all those things. I think they give pretty good coverage to things that are unfavorable to Trump. So, I think.
Well, I would agree with you there. I think the New York Times is extremely critical of Trump. Pretty much every other article criticizes Trump. But to not discuss perhaps the crime of the millennium is pretty troubling, is it not?
Well, maybe you should be editor there for a while, Hal. But since
I'm asking your opinion, I'm giving you mine. I think this is something that it should be they should be talking about every day, just as I do, or at least every other day, and it's rarely on the front page of the Times.
Yeah, people are just getting so used to what's going on there, unfortunately, and just accepting it and knowing and probably thinking, well, nothing's going to change. It's just going to continue the way it has been, and which is sad. You're right. There really should be more coverage and more effort to, get that war over. And
all right, let's move on to another area where, again, I feel like the New York Times has been remiss. And I won't, say overtly because I think they're corrupt. Okay, I do think they're corrupt, but today is Earth Day. Shouldn't they be talking about then the climate crisis, the ever hotter temperatures, and the sixth grade extinction? And again, there's not one story. Now, they talk about EPA poised to cancel grants to study dangers to children, but that's not with respect to the climate. They talk about those bonuses for the baby boom. I think that's an important story. President calls chat concerns. That's where Hegseth was sharing, defense information on Signal with family members. I mean, those are important stories. I'm not saying they're not, but it is Earth Day. Shouldn't there be at least one story? There's nothing, by the way, below the line there. The kind of like they refer you to other articles in the front section. They don't mention on Earth Day what humans are doing to our planet. And I don't think that's defensible, Arlen, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. There should be something there, but, compared to other media outlets, which, the right wing seems to control so many of them, the corporate media is that way too, that, it's rare that anybody covers that the way that you would and I might like them to do. So, but I think the New York Times is probably better than almost any others as far as a major news outlet.
Arlen, you have indulged me in my stories and my tendentiousness, which I really appreciate. So let's get to some of the stories that you really wanted to talk about. And I think they're good ones. I mean, it's not like I don't share your views. So let's get to, first of all, the big picture report. I just want to put that on screen. Arlen, of course, blogs there. He posts stories that are of interest to him, of course. And let me just see if we can get the bottom there. I want to put it below. Yeah, it should be below because it's got that sort of the landscape. When it's portrait, I try to put us stacked up in the portrait on the right. When it's a landscape like the big picture report, we put it below us, Arlen, as you can see there. And you even have, I think, you've got some environmental images there, a power plant, a nuclear power plant, and is that a Pelican in oil, I believe. So kudos to you for that. The big picture report, Arlen focusing on this remark. Set this stage for us, Arlen. How badly did the president make himself out to be with his, as Sky News calls it, hilariously savage Easter message?
Yeah, it's inexcusable. I think it's horrible what he did. He wrote a few nice things about, Happy Easter, but then he came back with this one in which he, made a real effort to criticize just about all his enemies, all the people he doesn't like. And, at the very end, he says Happy Easter. But, in between, it's pretty fierce and pretty unfair, I think.
I mean, it's truly embarrassing, I think, for him, first of all. It's an embarrassment to our country that he's our leader. It kind of leaves you speechless, Arlen, really, and I'll play it, but did you have any kind of another intro that you wanted, anything else you want to just comment before we play the video itself?
Yeah, last night I just did some notes about all the things that went on in the news yesterday, and I think it's just incredible. We'll start with Defense Secretary Haig's and his Signalgate problem, then Trump's Easter message. The stock market was crashing yesterday. You got the problem with that immigrant in El Salvador. Then you have Trump talking about firing Jerome Powell, head of the Federal Reserve. And then you have the head of Homeland Security, what's her name, Kristi Noem, losing her purse with $3,000 and all her important papers, while the, Secret Service is watching her. These things, I just can't imagine how anybody would feel good about Trump after all, with all this kind of news going on. It's terrible.
He is a real embarrassment. I'm going to make you a little smaller. Now I got you too blown up, Arlen. I don't want to have you. There we go. So let's play the video, Arlen. I think it speaks for itself. That's why I didn't want to go overboard playing it first. But here we go. There he is, the commander-in-chief.
Donald Trump has unleashed this Easter, using his Easter message on Truth Social to slam all of his detractors while still backhandedly wishing them a happy Easter. He wrote, "Happy Easter to all, including the radical left lunatics who are fighting and scheming so hard to bring murderers, drug lords, dangerous prisoners, the mentally insane, and well-known MS-13 gang members and wife beaters back into our country."
I'm going to just stop it there for a second, Arlen, and we'll play more. That's basically false, what he just said. What civil rights advocates and constitutional lawyers and the like are insisting, and the judges, are that you afford people due process, many of whom are not murderers and rapists and gangbangers. You've even acknowledged you made, their paperwork errors. You've deported students who did nothing to endanger anybody. So he lies. He lied there. It's just a false statement, but it's also so vindictive and mean-spirited. I hesitate to ask this question because I know we agree on this, but the question, I mean, why did he get elected? Let me make it more pointed. How badly did the Democrats screw everything up for him to get elected?
Well, definitely the Democrats did screw up, but there's also, I think, For many decades now, I think the far right has been, working really hard to get to the place they are now. I think, with the think tanks, with the billionaires, with the tax breaks, with the Supreme Court decisions, they finally got to the point where they wanted to be, and they're going to take full advantage of it. And Trump's going to allow them to do it. That's sort of the way I look at it. But
do you think, though, let me just interrupt you for 1 sec. Because I think that's fair. I mean, I don't disagree with that. I think that's a cogent analysis, except I would question, is he really the far right's guy? I mean, wouldn't you, and maybe I'm asking, I'm not sure about this, maybe a DeSantis or even like a Jeb would be someone that the kind of, billionaire class in certain ways would feel more comfortable with.
Yeah, and J.D. Vance also. But I think they know that with Trump, they could, move him around. They could form him in the way they want him to be, because he's happy to go along with them as long as they're, nice to him. And I noticed, one thing that really bugs me about Trump is everything that goes wrong, that he blames Biden and the Democratic administration and keeps talking about how they're the worst in the history of the world and all this kind of stuff. So Trump is very predictable and he's easily manipulated, I think, and that's why they're not unhappy to have him on the top.
All right, let's play a little more of this video.
Happy Easter also to the weak and ineffective judge and law enforcement officials who are allowing this sinister attack on our nation to continue. An attack so violent that it will never be forgotten. Sleepy Joe Biden purposely allowed millions of criminals to enter our country, totally unvetted and unchecked, through an open borders policy that will go down in history as the single most calamitous act ever perpetrated upon America. He was by far our worst and most incompetent president, a man who had absolutely no idea what he was doing. But to him and to the person that ran and manipulated AutoPen, perhaps our real president, and to all of the people who cheated in the 2020 presidential election.
And of course, Trump was the one who tried desperately to cheat. Maybe he really believes that he won, but he most certainly did not win. And that's a tough one, Arlen, because, when I argue with people of all political persuasions, and I never make any headway, but the MAGA people, on some issues, I feel like I can reach them a little bit, or we don't completely disagree, but like war with Russia, for example. But when it comes to that insurrection, they believe that Trump really won. I mean, I think a lot of them really do think that.
Well, my reading of it is I don't think Trump really thought he won, but he, was able to get that into his mind because Trump would never admit defeat on anything. He wins everything, everything goes well, and he's just not going to ever say that he lost anything. So I think, and then people listened to him, and he was so strong about it that they said, "Oh, he must be right because he's so, talking so strongly about it," and that's why we have what we have now.
All right, let's play just a little bit more. Just finish this off.
In order to get this highly destructive moron elected, I wish you, with great love, sincerity, and affection, a very happy Easter.
All right, so that's from Sky News Australia, which, by the way, is a Trump supporting outlet. And I guess they tried to play that straight, but...
Yeah. I mean, what kind of an Easter message is that? Easter is supposed to be about love and peace and understanding. And look what he's still talking about, everything he's angry about and everything he wants revenge on and blaming Democrats and Biden for everything. It's very sad.
Arlen, you noted, as did I, that Trump's hateful, vindictive message and his rhetoric is not confined in the Republican Party to Trump. I didn't play the video, but we have one of Nancy Mace. She's a South Carolina congresswoman lacing into a constituent of hers, I believe, who asked her a pretty innocuous question: "Are you going to have a town hall?" And she responded with a vindictive, profanity-laced tirade against him. She took it as a dig that the Republicans have been cowardly when it comes to having town halls, but the response was completely over the top. So, and I think Marjorie Taylor Greene had some pretty unpleasant comments about the Pope. So, I mean, it's very troubling. I don't know. Do you have a sort of a bow you want to tie around all this?
Well, I think there's a lot of that going around. A lot of people are upset and angry. And you watch these town halls that Republicans put on, and they're being yelled at and criticized. And it just seems to be the general atmosphere now that everybody's yelling at each other and criticizing each other, and mostly from the right, I think, and just saying what they want to say and criticizing the other side.
But given the reality as you just described it, and also the reality that Democrats right now are not popular. The Democrats' approval rating, at least the last I checked, was even below Trump's, which you've noted is dropping, although not steadily, if not precipitously. What would your advice be? And I know you don't like these questions, but I like them, so I'm asking it. What's your advice if Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries came to you and said, Arlen, what should we be doing now to make the Democratic brand more palatable to more people?
Well, number one, get rid of both of them. I think Schumer's too old and, set in his ways. And Hakeem Jeffries is very smart, but he's not enough he doesn't inspire people. And so I think we need some younger leaders, which I think AOC is trying to, talk about, and and really go as strong as they possibly can to fight back against Trump. It's not going to be easy, but you can see he's not all that popular. I mean, he's having a lot of trouble, and he's not, his approval rating is not that great. So, it's going to be tough. I mean, the Democrats are in a very bad position, and they have to wait till the 2026 election to get any kind of changes and maybe get the House of Representatives in Democratic hands. So it's not going to be easy. They're in a bad position. They ran a bad campaign, and that's why Trump's in there.
All right, Arlen Grossman with us. He is the thought leader. He blogs. I was sorry for having struggles with my verbiage. He blogs at thebigpicturereport.com, and it's right on your screen so you can see it there. You can click like, you can click subscribe if you like what we're doing here. Definitely subscribe to Arlen's blog, The Big Picture Report. And yeah, I didn't put it up, Arlen, but I've got to put my GIF. I've got to get all my little ducks in a row, which, by the way, one of our mutual friends did compliment me on the production values of this program, which I appreciate very much. But he said, don't ever say you're sorry. You don't need to say you're sorry. You do a good job. It's fine. You don't need to apologize for anything. There's the final advice we're going to give you, though, which is do join. Move that down just a little bit. Join Halitics on Facebook. You can see Arlen getting attacked left, right, and well, at least from the right, quite a bit. Arlen, you take a lot of heat on Facebook. You really do, and on Halitics anyway. But
I expect it. It's just goes with the territory.
You put yourself out there, and you know that it's going to happen. So there you go. We did have to suspend somebody. I hate to do that, but if you're inside, make it, because I think a lot of the criticism of Arlen, when it's over the top, I just delete it. But if it's just disagreeing with you vehemently, I'll leave it in. That's my line. No personal insults, no attacks, but you can criticize people's arguments even pretty vehemently if you disagree with them.
It's just like Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene and all the people saying crazy things when they should be focusing on issues, not on personalities and swear words and all that kind of thing. That's
Well, I agree with that. And I don't have a problem. If people, let me say it this way, I may have a problem with it, but I don't generally delete stuff that insults politicians, public officials. You go after them, they're pretty much fair game. But I also think it's not really effective. I think it's much more effective to say this person said this and now they're doing that. This person's policy is this, but it's leading to this bad outcome. I think that's how you win. But I'm just naive, and logic and reason aren't all they're cracked up to be.
Well, these days, the way we talk to each other, the way we write to each other, I think it's really bad. I mean, I think the internet has a lot to do with it. Social media has a lot to do with it. And, we're not like in the old days when we wrote our name and what town we're from and all that. And, you could have some responsibility for what you say. Now people just put anything out there and nobody knows who they are. It's done anonymously, and it's gotten a lot more bitter and hateful.
No question about it. Arlen is the thought leader. I had both of those captions under me, but he's the thought leader. So, couple of quick stories. We don't have that much time, unfortunately, but you wanted to talk about this magical mineral, fluoride, and RFK Jr.'s efforts to take it out of our mouths.
Yeah, the person that wrote that particular piece said the reason he's even talking about fluoride is just to get people's minds off measles, which there are more and more cases and more people dying from measles. But fluoride used to be, crazy people in the extreme used to say fluoride is going to kill you or whatever. It's really bad, and then it's become pretty accepted in low, proper doses and all that, and has a really great record, but there are people like RFK Jr. and others who, want to say that it's dangerous and all that. And in fact, the entire state of Utah has taken fluoridation out of their water. So, there's a lot of people who don't really believe in science and what is more established, and they go for the conspiracies, and this is one of them. I think fluoride has proved itself to be very useful in keeping people's teeth from getting cavities, and if we get rid of it, we're all going to pay.
No question about it, Arlen. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer. I did a little research, and I'm glad you shared this article. I did a little research because I'd heard on some videos from some people I kind of respect on YouTube that there were European countries that don't fluoridate the water, and they don't have higher cavity rates. They don't have higher rates of tooth decay. So we don't absolutely need to fluoridate the water. And I did a little research into that. I'll get into what that found. But bottom line, fluoridation fluoride protects your teeth. You can get fluoride on your teeth in other ways than fluoridated water. But no other way is as effective, as comprehensive. No other way protects little children. You can brush your teeth with fluoride, and as I understand it, that will protect your teeth. But you can't always get a 2-year-old, right, to brush their teeth, or whenever usually your baby teeth come in when you're under 1, and then maybe your permanent teeth come in 5 or 6. So forget about 2. But it's tough to get a youngster to brush their teeth. Maybe 8, 9, they're not going to brush their teeth necessarily. So, but if you drink water, everybody drinks water, it protects the teeth. And even in countries where, like you said, we've seen it over and over. This article nails it. I wouldn't say I was skeptical, but I just wanted to dot my I's and cross my T's. So I learned a little bit from this, Arlen. Thank you.
Well, let me make it personal, okay? I grew up in Los Angeles, and at the time when I grew up, they didn't have fluoridated water. And ever since, I've had terrible problems with my teeth. I've had all kinds of cavities and dental work done all my life. And I think, partly I have to attribute that to the fact that I didn't have fluoridated water. And I think it's pretty much established that if you have, the proper dose of fluoridated water, you're going to have less cavities and less, dental problems.
Yeah, that's exactly what the author says, and it's really not arguable.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff like that with RFK Jr. And the thing with the measles and vaccinations and all that. I mean, we could be in for some major health problems. In fact, 60 Minutes, as we mentioned before, did a whole thing on the bird flu and how it could be even worse than COVID. But they're getting rid of people who will, research that and test that. And so we'll just have to wait and see how bad it might be.
It's interesting. One thing I highlighted that more children's teeth will rot because I think that's really important, of course. But I didn't highlight, but maybe I should have, where the author writes, the worst effects will fall on disadvantaged children. And I think that is, if it's not conscious by this administration and by RFK Jr., it's certainly very close to the surface. This idea, hey, wealthy people, elites should not only have more, they should be healthier. They should be more attractive. They should have first choice when it comes to mates, even more than they already do. And if, you can look at somebody and their teeth are bad and they're falling out of their mouth, you know that they're lower class. You know that they're not somebody you would want to be with. So we're going to, again, make, we're going to make more and more distinctions between people based on how wealthy they are when they're born and how wealthy their family is. It's disgusting. It's despicable.
Yeah, and you got to. It all goes back to, a lot of it goes back to the fact that we don't have medical care for everybody, and same with dental care, and that's why the poor people, most of them can't afford dental work like they'll have with less fluoride. So their teeth will be rotting, and they won't be able to do anything about it.
It was interesting what you were saying too about your own experience, because when I was when I was running my own business, I wanted to make sure people that I worked with had healthcare, and teeth were an issue because even I don't think Medi-Cal covered teeth, and we could barely afford to pay people. So I would pay for sometimes treatments for people, and teeth are a big expense, and they're totally not covered. You just have to pay out of pocket unless you're lucky enough to have insurance. But I don't know that Medi-Cal, maybe it covers children, but not adults. I'm not, and it may have changed too, Arlen. I'm not really sure about all that, but
I'm sure the coverage
again, it puts a burden on small business owners as well, which is, I don't think Google and all of Trump's buddies who sponsor the Easter egg roll, which is Bezos and Zuckerberg and whoever else he had out there, all the big tech bros, they don't care about small businesses. They're glad to make it harder for small businesses. And this was really important. Let me just throw this out there. The experience of places that have stopped fluoridating. And I looked this up. I wanted to confirm this, and I was able to confirm, yes, in Israel, for example, there are more cavities now. There's more tooth decay because they stopped fluoridating water, especially among children.
Yeah, and another issue besides dental care is also vision. Vision I don't think is covered either. So, you got a lot of things that just aren't being covered in this country that are, if you go across to Europe and other advanced countries, and it's just awful and terrible that we don't, give our people the proper health care that they need.
Well, would you tell, I'm going to go back to my question, what would you tell Hakeem and Chucky Boy if they called you in for a consultation? Would you say to them, hey, give everybody health care, go fight tooth and nail, make Medicare for all the top issue in the Democratic platform? Would that be some of your advice for them?
Well, yeah, that's what Bernie is saying, and that's what we've been saying. A lot of the progressives have been saying for years. We need to cover our people the way that all other advanced countries are being covered. And now we're at a position where if you have a bad medical problem, you could possibly go bankrupt, and that's just not right in a rich country like ours.
It's not only the moral thing to do, I think it's the politically astute thing to do. I think they would win elections if they did that. And you can see here from the Israel Journal, just wanted to throw this up there real quick, Israel Journal of Health Policy Research, very recent, 20 September of last year. And the result was a statistically significant increase in the mean number of treatments in the years after fluoride cessation. So you needed more treatment. There was approximately a twofold increase. So that means, I think, 3 times. If you had one cavity before, you'd get 3, because a onefold increase would be 2 cavities. So for every one, you'd have another. But for twofold, you'd have, for every one, you have 2. So you'd have 3 times as many cavities you would otherwise have. And then the conclusion makes a lot of sense, obviously. Further proof of the need to restore community water fluoridation in Israel.
I think what'll be really interesting to see the experience that Utah has statistically, in a few years, and see how their lack of fluoride for the whole state, how that affects the people that live there.
Arlen, I told you I wanted to end at exactly 3 my time, noon yours, but I lied. I'm going to go a little longer. I do have something I have to do, but I want to get in your second story that you promoted. By the way, before we get to your site, well, I'll put it on there, but I have a question for you that's a digression here. From maybe your favorite, I don't know, I think he's your favorite, Nick Kristof, what Trump isn't telling you about his trade war with China. I like this article too. I really did. And I like the other one. I didn't find much to disagree with in it, but I have a question for you, Arlen. I said, your second story. So let's just, here's see how old you are, Arlen. Do you know what a second story man is?
Well, somebody that works up very high in, buildings or whatever, washing windows.
Sort of, but it's really a burglar. It's a house burglar. They're called a second story man because they go in via a window on the second story.
Okay.
It's a very old term that dates back to the 20s. Well, we were living in the 20s. So it was the 1920s that they would use that expression. Not quite that old. So, but with regard to your second story, what Trump isn't telling you about his trade war with China, what is he not telling us, Arlen?
Well, the fact that we really need China more than they need us. They're well prepared if there's going to be problems. They have the rare earth minerals and all that we absolutely have to do our technology and build our phones and everything else. And so I don't think Trump is really prepared to take on China, and they're in a better position than we are. And it's not going well.
Yeah, I'm not as concerned about losing the rare earth minerals. There are other sources, although, as Kristof points out, I believe some of them are only found in China. I'm not, look, if we have fewer cell phones, that's not the end of the world. If we have fewer fighter jets, that's not the end of the world either. But what I did really like was this section here, which I'm going to highlight. His concerns are legitimate. They are manipulating trade, and we really have weakened too far. I mean, I don't think we should have weakened it at all, but our manufacturing base has been weakened. The long supply lines are obviously a problem. And he says, I'd like it if Trump used targeted tariffs, crackdown on transshipments, meaning to evade tariffs. So that's where they offload the goods in Mexico or Canada. And then that's part of the reason he's talking about tariffs for Mexico and Canada, because those countries have helped China evade the tariffs that are currently in place. So I liked all of that. I thought that was true. Trump is using a sledgehammer when he should be using either a ball-peen hammer or maybe even a scalpel.
Well, he gave some relief to every other country in the world, but when it came to China, what is it now? 145% tariffs. I mean, that's crazy. And, China's not going to stand for it, and they're not going to give in to us. So we may end up giving up to them, and Trump may have to relieve those kind of huge tariffs.
Well, China's really kind of limited in what they can do in response. I mean, they can slap tariffs on our imports into China or exports into China, but that is a much smaller number, right? We send far less to China than they send to us, so that would hurt us far less than the tariffs are hurting them, and we benefit from the tariffs because we're already seeing some onshoring, some what do they call it? Reshoring. I don't know what it is of goods and stuff. But again, I agree with Kristof. This is being done in a haphazard, slapdash, over-the-top way. He points out that China could dump U.S. treasuries, panicking the bond market and weakening the dollar. I think that's true, although he acknowledges that China really would be cutting its own throat if it did that. So I think, Trump does kind of have China over a barrel here. To me, the bigger issue, again, is failures of the Democrats to to protect American jobs are why Trump is able to push this not particularly well thought through strategy.
Well, I get the impression from Christoph that I think China is in a better position than we are in a trade war. And look at all the things that we get from China and the everyday things we buy. So many things are made in China. So, that's going to make a big difference. So I just don't think Trump has really thought it out. And we know he doesn't really think out these things too much. He mostly does it by instinct. And he may have to change his mind about China.
Well, it's true that so many things are made in China, but isn't that really the problem? I mean, don't we want them to be made here? That's a legitimate concern, right? Is that we don't manufacture here. We send the dollar overseas, and we also have fewer jobs as a result.
Well, my impression is it takes several years to get these kind of things going, manufacturing in this country. And I don't know if we have the time to wait for, a few years to get it all made in America. So I don't know. There's economists that know a lot more than you and I do, and we'll see what goes on.
Well, most economists agree with you. Your view, to put it a different way, seems to be shared by, or you seem to take a view that is shared by more economists than not mine. But experts disagreeing with me has never stopped me. So
I don't claim to be an expert.
All right, so there's just a little bit more. Without them, and I mentioned this, we'd struggle to produce drones, cars, planes, wind turbines, and more. A single F-35 fighter contains some 900 pounds of rare earth. So again, I'm not troubled if we manufacture fewer fighter planes, and we need to consume less. The problem is there's so much wealth and income inequality. The poor will obviously, and the working class will suffer, and the wealthy will not. And that is what we need to change.
That's history. That's always been that way. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer.
Arlen, you mentioned AOC, and you said that she is exciting Democrats. This is true. She doesn't particularly excite me, but she does excite Democrats. The Hill, Neil Stanage, who I think is quite a good columnist. You can call him that. It's all online, I believe. I don't think they have a hard copy anymore, but he ranked the top 10 Democratic contenders for 28. I know you say it's very, very early, but you mentioned AOC. He puts her first. What do you think about that?
Well, she's certainly the most exciting of the Democratic candidates, and really most beloved among progressives. But a lot of people, just because of her reputation as being too far left or whatever, are going to have some trouble with her. So it'll take some time to see, the kind of impression she gives everybody over the years. And I think it's one reason why she's been a little more conservative than you would like her to be the last few years. I think she's, putting herself in a position where she's going to be more establishment and acceptable to more Democrats.
Do you think she's succeeded in that endeavor?
Well, we'll have to wait and see, but certainly I'm really excited about the crowds that she and Bernie get all around the country. And, she's exciting Democrats, and certainly Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are not.
Do you think, and I just want to point out the names after her more because they're kind of non-entities, aren't they? I mean, I don't think most Americans would even be able to pick Josh Shapiro or Gretchen Whitmer out of a lineup. And Gavin Newsom does not excite people. I mean, he is known for sure, certainly compared to the other two, he's more certainly identifiable, but I don't think he's that well thought of. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, you're right. I'm not a big fan of Newsom. And yeah, that's true. The Democrats, it's like I say, it's very early, and somebody can, come up late, like I was mentioning, Obama, Clinton, they all came up, Carter, they all came up kind of late. And so there's still time for others to, push forward and make their stance.
Well, I didn't put the other names up here. I don't even remember who Stanage names as number 5, but number 6 is Kamala. So she's fallen quite a bit. And I think I would probably move her up to, that would not be my list. I want to be honest with you. My list would be AOC. I would put her first, but I would go Newsom 2, and I would go Harris 3, mainly based on name recognition, if no other reason.
Well, I think one of the most interesting would be Pete Buttigieg. You know, he's a great verbally, but whether he can be accepted for being gay, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think the identity is the issue. I think it's just, again, I don't think he's that exciting a character either. And, he was the mayor of a small town, really, a small city, and he was Secretary of Transportation, and there were some failings in that area, whether fairly blamed on him or not. He's taking a bit of a fall for that. So I don't think I would put him on the same level in terms of potential presidential run as some of these other names. But I understand many feel the same way you do on that, Arlen. Let me go back, though, to the question of the establishment. And, many Bernie supporters, you and I both supported Bernie. Many Bernie supporters, I'm not one of them, blame the establishment for tanking Bernie. I blame Democratic primary voters who had a good choice and chose bad ones. So here's my question, though. To the extent that the establishment, which I guess we would identify as Obama, Nancy Pelosi, although she's getting quite old now, Steny Hoyer, the old guard, if you will, to the extent that they have real power, real influence, A, do you think they would use it to stop AOC's candidacy? And B, do you think they have the power to stop her candidacy?
Well, certainly they would probably not like her for sure. But, let me remind you, Hal, it's not 2028 yet. We've got so many years till then. And, I'm not worried about it at this point. But the Democrats definitely have to do something different and, make a different kind of a, stance as to their policies and how they're going to deal with especially billionaires and big corporations.
I know you think it's early. It is early. So it's not just that you think it is. But do you not think there's value if, and I'm not saying I necessarily support AOC, but I might consider supporting her, whereas I would almost certainly not support any other Democrat who's considering running. There's other Democrats I might like a little more than I like her. I don't like her that much, but I might consider voting for her. This is really my question, though. Do you not think, and I know you say it's early, isn't there value, though, if, let's assume that based on the polling, based on these big crowds that she and Bernie are bringing out, that there's a recognition, at least among the progressive side, that she is the one candidate who really can excite people. She can bring new voters, maybe people that have lapsed Democrats, maybe Latinos who voted for Trump. But she can do outreach to them. She can grab them. She has a real chance, and she would govern to the left of these others. Isn't there value trying to build momentum for her right now and trying to cast her nomination as inevitable?
Well, that would be nice, and I'm a big fan of hers, and I'd love to see her as president. But it'll just take some time for her to get, recognized as somebody that's, really could do something like that, could be a president. By the way, there's one other person that you didn't name, and sometimes I see, and that's your governor in Maryland, Wes Moore, right?
Right. Wes Moore was number 5 on that list, right? As soon as you said it, I realized. So it went AOC, Shapiro, Whitmer, Newsom, Wes Moore, Harris. I put Wes Moore in the same category as Josh Shapiro and Gretchen Whitmer. Kind of a non-factor, really. Not a real exciting guy. Not somebody who's going to draw crowds. He is good looking, but I don't think he's particularly charismatic. But perhaps he's not really a national figure.
I think a lot of people know Josh Shapiro a lot more, based on that fire at his home.
All right, before that does it, I've gone through my deck. Arlen, you always get the last word. Is there anything I missed that you want to hit that we didn't, or that we just didn't spend enough time discussing, in your opinion?
I think we did very well, Hal. I think we covered all the important issues, and we'll just have to cover the rest next week.
All right. Well, thank you all then for watching the special Earth Day 2025 edition of Halitics on an Arlen Tuesday. And I, but not Arlen, will be back tomorrow. Arlen will be back in a week.